Hello.
Look how bright you are today.
It's the colours.
So vibrant. It's amazing.
Oh, I need headphones. I don't think I brought headphones.
I should probably do the same. I haven't really done that.
I'll just see if I've quickly got some because I've just finished treating.
Headphones. So vibrant. Hi, Cara. Hi, Kate. Natalie.
I don't think I do.
Found your headphones?
No, I don't have headphones.
Have you eaten any dinner?
Yes,
Nah.
I've had some broth. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Great. Good to know that you're still looking after yourself.
Could you take them?
Are you sure?
Yeah. See you, honey. Bye.
Nothing like an
just seeing the last
Instagram
patient
live.
out.
Yeah. Nothing like an Instagram live, is there really? I was just sort of talking to myself, Amanda, and like to everyone here while we were waiting for you to join, just like it's a bit Groundhog Day today, but we're just not going to tap into that, are we? We're just going to pretend that doesn't exist. And we're going to talk about getting to know your reproductive system and anatomy. It's a really exciting topic. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. So this is our second Womb Talks for September Cycle Awareness Month, and we're really excited to be talking about our reproductive system and something that's really important. And I guess, like, you know, I personally only really learned about my reproductive system, I'd say last year, when things started to kind of break down and I had a few different experiences with my own body, and then actually started to learn about the way that my body works and different types of body parts and how that kind of comes together. And I still think that, you know, as a mid-30-year-old woman, I'm lacking so much knowledge in it still. So I'm pretty pumped to be deep diving on this topic. For those of you who have joined and don't know about All Natural Pharmacy, I'll just give you the quick sort of lowdown on us. So we're basically All Natural Pharmacy, and we're all about debunking myths, talking openly about periods. And our mission essentially is just to educate menstruators globally on their fifth vital sign, which is essentially our cycles, our periods. And really ultimately what we want to do is be able to educate people so we can make better informed health decisions. And, you know, there's so much that we don't learn throughout our kind of lives and our journey from being children into adulthood about our cycles. And so we're really trying to break that stigma, talk about some of the tough sort of, you know, stigma topics, or, you know, topics that have a bit of a stigma around them. And I guess, you know, educate people on what we didn't learn in high school, because so many of us haven't learned so much about our bodies. So it's really important that we deep dive into convos and topics like this. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining. This is Dr. Amanda Waaldyk, for those that don't know, and I nickname her as a wizard, and I hope that that's okay, Mans. I still keep referring to you as one because you are magical.
Thanks.
And so
I'll claim that, yes.
Great, please do. All my friends talk about you as the wizard. Have you seen the wizard lately? So you've got the reputation around town. So we're going to deep dive into the topic of getting to know our reproductive system. And I will just say, for anyone that has any questions throughout, we like to make this pretty engaging and interactive. So just drop your questions into the comments and we'll get to them as soon as we can, and as soon as I see them pop up. But my first question for you, and Mans, I know we spoke about this earlier today. You were like, shit, I didn't prepare a diagram this time. But usually Mans starts these Womb Talks with a diagram. I guess my first question for you is, like, what is our reproductive system, and then what parts does our system include?
Okay. So
have you drawn a diagram?
No, I haven't. Essentially, I mean, the thing is, we have two reproductive systems. We have a male reproductive system and we have a female reproductive system. And so our reproductive system essentially relates to our hormones and then also our reproductive anatomy. So, I mean, I guess a great way to start actually is, so many of us are not connected to our bodies or don't really understand our anatomy parts. And I think a great way is, does everyone know that bony prominence, the external bony prominence, which is your pubic bone? So if everyone literally, if you find the top of your hips and you come down on an angle and you'll find a bony prominence. So that's your pubic bone. So that's your mons pubis there. So that's where we have all our pubic hair. So we'll do externally. And then as we come down, we have our labia. And these are essentially what we refer to as our lips. In between there, we have the fold, we have our clitoris, and our clitoris has over 8,000 sensory nerves. It's its own sexual organ.
Wild, like 8,000.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? That's why it's
part of your body.
That's why it's so highly sensitive.
Yeah.
And I mean, it creates magic, doesn't it? I mean, it's so nice to have without penetration, you can still have an orgasm.
It's pretty incredible.
It's so incredible. We have our perineum. So we have the entrance to our vagina, and then along we have our perineum, and then we have our anus, and our anus is a sphincter muscle. And I mean, this is all important for down the track for pregnancy. And then we have I won't go into all the external reproductive anatomy. And then we come internally and we have the entrance. So we have our vagina, and then we come up and we have the neck of our cervix. And our cervix is essentially what closes over when we're pregnant. The cervix becomes long and closed. And then as we make our way, I should really draw one, I should find one. As we make the way to the top of our uterus, that's called our fundus. And so for those that are pregnant, when you go in for your measurements, they measure the top of your uterus, and it's uterus that expands to create capacity for your growing baby. And then, which is what's really fascinating. So the uterus is essentially just suspended in midair. So it's just hanging out there by itself.
Free balling.
Yes. It's attached with ligaments, so sacral ligaments, and then you've got your nerve ganglia from your sacrum that feeds into essentially the reproductive organs and has specific functions. And then, of course, as we know, if you can visualize, we have our fallopian tubes. And then we have our ovaries. Now, the ovaries aren't actually attached to the fallopian tube. They're attached by their own ovarian ligaments. And so the ovary is what houses our eggs. So at puberty, we have around 2 million eggs that are dormant.
Wow.
And then when we go through puberty, when our hormones start, which is estrogen and progesterone, then it slowly dwindles down to around 400,000 eggs. So you think over that lifetime, by the time we get to menopause is essentially where our egg supply has reduced and dwindled. And that's when, because we don't have any eggs to release anymore for ovulation, that's when we, go through menopause. So estrogen declines, progesterone declines.
Okay. So I just have to ask a question off the back of that, and then we'll go back to kind of the parts, because I think it's really important for us to unpack the parts and the roles that they play. But so, like, at what point is our reproductive system fully formed, or is that a silly question?
No, our reproductive system's formed in utero. So, which is so. I don't know what month it's fully formed, but when I'm in my grandmother's womb, so as I was an egg forming in my mother's womb, around 4 months it is, we are actually an egg inside our mother's womb in our grandmother's womb. So it's quite amazing ancestrally how we carry this genetic link.
Which is a massive thing, because actually a lot of people, and I won't digress too much, but a lot of people do talk about, like, generational trauma and trauma from your womb, right? Which actually, when you think about it, we were eggs in our grandmother's wombs. Like, that's right. Incredible. So that's the link, right? Cool, mind blowing.
That's it.
Absolutely. Mind blowing emoji, but it is, right? Like, it is. You talk about it, but you just sort of like, you don't really get the connection. And you're just like, whoa. That's pretty
and then we're also connected through the umbilical cord. So our umbilical cord holds all the ancestral DNA that connects us to our grandmothers, our 4 grandmothers, and all the back along our ancestral maternal lineage. So And in Chinese medicine, blood is memory. So blood is what holds the substance. So you think about all the genetic material and memory that we're actually carrying ancestrally into this current lifetime. So some of the things that we're experiencing, we know that with endometriosis is there's a genetic link to our maternal lineage, is that sometimes our mothers may not have had endometriosis, but our grandmothers have had endo. So, and then that's passed down through the lineage.
Yeah, and that would have been undiagnosed at the time too, right? Because
Yes.
I mean, who's diagnosing endo in our grandmother's generation?
No,
We're
totally overlooked.
To look at all of that now. Yeah,
women were having children younger, and then also too, by the time if they were experiencing heavy periods, they were having a hysterectomy. So that's a key point to find out your mother's history and your grandmother's history, because if they had a hysterectomy but endometriosis wasn't diagnosed, there's a high chance that your grandmother would have had endometriosis or fibroids.
Yeah, right. And so I'm going to come back to that, and I guess it's all located in the body. But before we go there, can we just go back to the different kind of role that our parts play, I guess? So, you know, what do our ovaries do? What does the uterus do? The cervix? Can we kind of just unpack that a little bit more and the role that they play when it comes to reproduction?
Absolutely. So, Irene, essentially, as a person with a womb, women and females are designed to procreate. That's essentially our biological nature. And so when we go through puberty, that is the first time when we have our menstruation that we're actually considered to be fertile. And so it's really interesting because every month we go through the 4 phases, which is what we covered last week. So if you missed last week's, you can definitely listen to last week's to find out more about the hormonal changes. So we have 4 phases, and each month we release an egg, and this is deemed ovulation. So the eggs are each month we grow a dominant follicle that's housed within the ovaries, and then we release an egg from that ovary that then travels down the fallopian tube, and then with the possibility to, if we're conceiving, to reach sperm. And if not, what happens is that egg is then reabsorbed back into the body if we haven't fallen pregnant. And the ovary that's released that follicle, the follicle then comes into the corpus luteum, and that's the hormone that produces progesterone. So it travels to the fallopian tube. If we conceive, it actually implants into the endometrial lining. So the endometrial lining is what we shed each month, and that's a visualization of our blood. Our myometrium is the external layer, which is the uterus. And the uterus essentially, it's like a protection, right? So it's there to house the potentiality of our baby. And also to support our reproductive organs. So if we were to have a hysterectomy, for example, is that sometimes the hysterectomy, the uterus itself will be removed. And then if we have a full hysterectomy, that means we will remove also to the reproductive organs, which are the ones that produce your hormones. So your estrogen and your progesterone from the ovaries. Cervix.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm like, hold on, whoa. So okay, so cervix, because you've touched on some of the common kind of parts. So fallopian tubes, ovaries, uterus. So yeah, what role does your cervix play?
Okay, so the cervix is, I'm trying to bring up a diagram.
Of course you are. Quickly sketch one, man. Yeah, awesome.
Right, so the cervix, I don't know if you can see that in there.
Well, sort of.
So the cervix is what produces our cervical fluid each month. So and estrogen helps to produce the cervical fluid, and we have different types of cervical crypts, right? So the cervical crypts change nature throughout our cycle to the different fluctuations of hormones. And so their role, the cervical mucus, it's a mucus or a fluid, is to help the sperm to essentially travel up the fallopian tube to meet the egg. So our cervical mucus is a lubrication as well. So it allows us to, of course, when we're in the mood or we're feeling quite horny, is that our cervical mucus will also increase. So that's the time around our fertile window.
And that's why when we're ovulating, essentially, there is more like what do you call it?
Lubricant.
Fluid, I guess.
Yeah.
Lubricant. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Basically, it's
Right.
just an easy, as
Full
I say,
circle.
easy entry, right? Penis
Amazing.
slides on in.
Absolutely.
So that's the time
Ready to go. Yeah.
That's the time that we're wet. I can tell I'm ovulating now because I've got cervical mucus.
Hey, sister, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, we're cycling
it's
together.
Ridiculous. Yeah, totally.
So we're coming into
wait, we're coming into summer, aren't we?
Yeah, summer phase.
Yeah,
which is exciting.
Great. It is exciting. Creativity happens.
Creativity is it's flowing like everything else,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And of course, estrogen, as we get older too, we can notice significant changes there as we to perimenopause. So you might notice that you're a little bit more dry with your cervical mucus, and I think that's one of the things as we head into those menopausal years. You know, we don't want to lose our sex drive. We still want to have a healthy libido. And it's helping to actually manage those symptoms. And even now, sometimes we might notice that we're not as wet as other months. And that's all influenced by what we're actually putting into our body, what our stress, mood, because everything that we do essentially affects this biological feedback, the hypothalamus, pituitary, ovarian axis.
Yeah, which we did speak about a lot last week. So if you did miss last week's Womb Talks, we really kind of got deep on cycles and the impact on our bodies. And so that's a really great point. But they're all saved on our IGTV. So please do go watch them if you missed last week's. So, Mand, I need to now understand. So we've kind of gone through these parts and the different roles that they play. So then when we talk about conditions like endometriosis, adenomyosis, things like fibroids, whereabouts in the body are they located?
Okay, so if you can imagine that we have, so we've got our
looking
vagina.
For more apparatus.
Well, I like to say that endometriosis is a condition where endometrial stroma and glands migrate to different parts within the reproductive organs, and most of the time that's outside. Very rarely do we find endometriosis internally inside our uterus. So it will tend to. So we have, imagining that this is our bladder. So we have our bladder, then we have our vagina, and behind here we've got our rectum. And so in between this pouch, it's called a pouch of Douglas. And so a lot of time endometriosis will be forming in this cul-de-sac, in this pouch of Douglas, of course, named after a man, Doug, the Doug guy. The Doug.
Bloody Doug.
Which is, and so that's where we start to get a lot of impact, where symptoms, IBS, painful, where we may get that sort of like really sharp pain, which is called dysphys. I can't pronounce it, but pain, like you're almost getting a stabbing pain through your anus. Endometriosis can also implant near the bladder as well, which then can affect. So for a lot of women, they'll experience sort of a feeling like fullness, needing to go to the toilet all the time. And also to our pelvic floor, which is internal, which, as I was talking about earlier, with the perineum, the pelvic floor is also quite influenced with endometriosis. And that's why it's really important to work with a holistic team to help to be able to understand if you do have a pelvic floor that's switched on a lot. Because what happens is, what do we do when we're in pain? So each month our body is getting ready. So our body has an imprint, right? So if we're experiencing pain each month, the body goes into that prepping, oh my goodness, I've got to get ready. And so the whole reproductive organ, the pelvic floor, should be nice and relaxed. Instead, the pelvic floor becomes switched on. And so then all the connective tissue around there starts to become extremely tight and bound. And that's also too when you can start to get a lot of the neuropathy pain found in adenomyosis. And also endometriosis. And so you can get a lot of that lower back pain. You can get that sort of nerve pain running down your legs. And then, of course, with adenomyosis, the endometriotic tissue then implants into the myometrium, which is the muscle layer of our uterus. And that's a smooth muscle. And smooth muscle, like our gastrointestinal tract, it doesn't like to have anything invading it. So over time, the nature of the uterus, it starts to change shape. And that's where I think we spoke about that last week, where we get sort of like a bulky uterus, and we can get constant bloating, because it's also too, I'm probably digressing here, but our reproductive organs are bathed in peritoneal fluid. So in yogic philosophy, this is called the sacral chakra. It's Swadhisthana, right? And so the elements, water likes to be fluid. And so do our reproductive organs. They're bathed in this peritoneal fluid. But if we're having things like endometriosis and adenomyosis, it starts to create a disruption with this water element, which then causes things like inflammation. It changes the actual nature of the peritoneal fluid, which can lead to more inflammation and pain, and the body's ability to be able to each month help to release a healthy period.
I mean, and without digressing too much, but like, how incredible is that we would know none of this, right? And we, on a day-to-day, get up out of bed and go, oh gosh, I'm bloated today, or geez, I ate a burger and I feel like crap, or I ate some bread and feel like crap. But you don't actually realize that our reproductive system, and then conditions like adeno, all play such a big part into how our body feels on a day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It affects us on a day-to-day. And that's the thing. It's like women and menstruators, I'm surprised. I mean, we can tolerate a lot, but it's not our nature either, is it? And it's really been able to then offer solutions that can support your reproductive cycle, but also help to support your hormones and give you at least some relief, because that's the thing. I think the greatest thing is that we're all looking for something that can help to support us. And I guess that's where, having researched for a long time, finding the best solutions to help support, to get really to the root cause. And I think that's what our tinctures.
I got cut off.
There?
Hello?
Yep.
Are we there? Okay, great. I just got cut
and
off.
I think
My
that's
screen time shut down. Sorry.
So I guess like on that, in Chinese medicine, we have Wei Qi, which means our immune system. So our immune system is to basically protect us against any colds, flus, viruses. Also too, it's our immune system involved in cancers. It's reproductive organs. And then we have Qi, which relates to energy. You back? It's like our heart beats through an electrical current. And then, of course, a lot of women's issues are blood related, because it's actually relating to the health of our cycle. And this is what's actually been overlooked so much. And I think we'll talk about that shortly, but with the Age article over the weekend. And so that's totally what our tinctures do. They go to the blood level, right, into the shui, to help reduce inflammation, to help create healthy, vital menstrual cycles, and reduce symptoms. So get to the root cause, but then also treat the branch, which is like the bloating, the abdominal pain, the nausea, your PMS, your tender breasts, because all the herbs are specific in the way that they are targeted to those specific symptoms.
Yeah, totally. And it's good kind of segue into this article from the Age that you did send me today. And I do want to touch on that, because we're talking about kind of like conditions like adeno and endo. And, when I read that article today, it was about, there's a lot of stories of women that have come so far in their like entire fertility journey. And so I'm going to digress this now to fertility, but they've come so far in their fertility journey, realize that they've got conditions like endo and adeno, and they kind of look in the past and go, geez, I wish I knew this, because I could have changed it. And so can we just start to talk a little bit around those conditions, how they affect fertility, and then how fertility kind of plays into all of this and our reproductive system and our anatomy? I guess that's a really big question, isn't it? But maybe let's start with kind of like there's just so much to go through, and I feel like everyone's mind's blown because we're not getting any questions. People are just probably like, whoa, this is too much. But and so I guess it's about, yeah, like understanding, you know, so many women menstruators go through the process of their fertility journey, realizing that they're then diagnosed with things like endo and adeno. How do we then kind of loop it back, educate us better, and then how does that actually play into our fertility, those conditions, and our entire reproductive system?
I think we know our bodies best, but there's been so much stigma around periods, sex, everything's taboo. So particularly here in the West, everything's always just been, don't talk about it. And so that's kind of like what we've all grown up with. And so we haven't really had the opportunity to have a liberation around sex, liberation around our periods. And I mean, that also is influenced culturally as well, and religious as well. So there's been so many things where we've actually been suppressed. And so through this long history, is that, you know, women's health has really kind of been pushed aside. And it's also too because a lot of majority of research was solely on the male reproduction, and then also to male hormones. No women have been involved in research, so there's a big gap that's missing. And of course then when we were growing up is, I think, you know, evolutionary, is that basically there's been such a piece of missing for so long, and we're finally maybe at a crux now where we can start to change this, and this is what we want to do, to really educate menstruators about their body anatomy, giving you a better understanding, and then of course how your fifth vital sign plays into that. So I think, yes, there's been a huge gap. A lot of also too, it was just fear around falling pregnant. So it was just like, you know, look at someone, you have sex once, you'll fall pregnant.
You're pregnant. That's what I was just going to say. So two things to that. One is that I was just talking to my housemate before I got onto this with you around how much of a stigma there was around periods, and the fact that, like, even asking for a tampon when you got your period in a workplace was just like, oh gosh, you wouldn't ever, you know, you'd be like, does anyone have a tampon? Does anyone have a tampon? I got my period, you know? And it's only really now that we're starting to talk about, hey, I got my period, has anyone got a tampon? Or that we're even comfortable to tell our, like, sexual partners or intimate partners, hey, I've got my period, you know? And that's only happened and evolved over the last, say, like 5 years, and we're just at the cusp of kind of that. But and then, like you said, we've grown up, we've been conditioned our entire life to worry about protecting ourselves from falling pregnant. And there's been such a notion of that rather than learning about our reproductive system to understand things like how it works and the ovulation window that we have. And you know, there's been just so much kind of misinformation, hasn't there? And that's kind of why we exist, to really just break down that misinformation and also provide products that get to the root cause of different conditions, right?
Yes, completely. So much misinformation.
Yeah. And so talking to kind of, like I read also in that article today that people are now starting to, with their fertility, when it comes to fertility, people are starting to make like reproductive plans because they're becoming a lot more aware of it. Like, how common would you say that reproductive plans are? Do you advise people to kind of come up with them? And like, where do we start, and how do we start to create a reproductive plan for ourselves?
Great. Well, I think it's really working with practitioners, a healthcare team that understand and advocate for your health, particularly starting with a GP that is willing to support you, to investigate, to really kind of see where your fertility status is, you know, depending on what our history is, our medical history, what's the history with our mum as well, and grandmother, is that. And if you've been on the contraceptive pill, so for many women, the issue lies is that they've been on the contraceptive pill for 15 years, so they don't actually even understand what their normal cycle is, what their normal cycle looks like. So when they come off the contraceptive pill, that's a lot of the time when they start to experience issues. And when we ask clients in clinic, we're like, what did you go on the pill for? Was it for contraception, or was it really to mask period pain for acne, irregular cycles. So that's already giving us a clue as to what's actually happening diagnostically back then as a teenager. It's kind of like piecing the puzzles together. And then also too, once, and having a pelvic ultrasound too. A pelvic ultrasound can show us so much information, what's happening internally, particularly with polycystic ovarian syndrome, how many, you know, cysts are there, little follicles, immature follicles. And that normally requires a diagnosis with an irregular cycle as well, and then testing specific hormones such as DHEA and testosterone. Also too, telling us what your endometrial lining's doing. Sometimes as well, some women will have menstruators will have anatomical issues. So that can be such as a heart-shaped uterus. You can have blocked fallopian tubes, which means that there can be debris in between the fallopian tubes that stops sperm being able to enter. And so it's really... And then, of course, you've got your hormonal issues such as adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis. We have fibroids, then including sexually transmitted diseases such as chlamydia. That's a big one because that can actually cause adhesions in the uterus and affect implantation. And then also to our CN1 cells, so, you know, our precancerous cervical cells. And that's the thing, a lot of women have had to have cone biopsies, which can then, you know, affect the cervix because they actually remove and take tissue from the cervix. And the cervix has to remain long when we're pregnant, because if it becomes too short, then we can lead to an incompetent cervix, which then affects the ability for you to be able to hold the pregnancy. So you can sort of start to understand, right, how important getting to know your body, but also to starting to look after your body. And AMH is a big one, which is the anti-Müllerian hormone. So essentially we've got an egg bed. And so that's one of the things that they like to test. So particularly for women, if they've had any cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer, is that most of the time a fertility specialist would recommend for them to go and freeze their eggs, because your egg pool can be affected by, or your egg quality can be affected by having to do chemotherapy. So, yeah, it's like...
No, I was just going to say, so there's so, like, I mean, because we've just gone full. So there's so much that affects our fertility, right? And our entire reproductive system. And so when we're talking about things like reproductive plans, I mean, your very first base level is like, speak to a healthcare professional and work with someone on that, and go get the right tests, and, you know, really understand your body and really understand your reproductive system in order to be able to work out what your fertility plan or what your reproductive plan might look like, right?
Absolutely, because it might be that you want to freeze your eggs. If you kind of know that you've got a particular type of condition, say for young women that we see a lot of in clinic with endometriosis, depending on how severe the grade of endo is and where the endo is being located, how much they could excise and remove, is that sometimes there is endometriosis around the ovaries, and that can therefore affect your egg quality. And so it's important then to know, okay, maybe I'm better off to bank my eggs now as opposed to waiting when I'm 35, because of course age is a big factor as well, and our fertility naturally declines by the time we sort of get, you know, into our late 30s, around 35.
I was going to ask that because there was a survey that showed that basically people don't know when their fertility starts to decline. And so you're saying around the age of 35, does that vary? And like, do our reproductive systems vary? Obviously from human to human, we vary in terms of our reproductive system, and depending on if you've got conditions and all of that. So in terms of like when your fertility starts to actually decline, does that vary in individuals as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on, and that's the thing, like when you're coming back to that whole egg analogy, you've been an egg in your grandmother's womb. You know, where were they in that time of the world? Like, were they in a war? Were they exposed? Were they living on the land? Were they exposed to high chemicals? Because that can also, what was the grandfather doing as well at that time? Because that can all play into the quality of your overall reproductive wellness and egg quality, essentially.
Yeah. And just to kind of try and close the loop here as well, I mean, our reproductive systems then essentially affect our everyday, day to day, like, but without us actually knowing that it's affecting our day to day, from diet to tight to fatigue, like all of it, right? Like it's driven somewhat by our reproductive system.
It's driven by our hormones.
Would that be fair to say?
Produced in our reproductive system. Yeah. So, and then if we go into that flight, fight, or freeze, we then access it through the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. So, yes, essentially we're this beautiful, delicate system of hormones that are humming along, that we don't really understand the impact on our gynecological health, let alone our reproductive health and menstrual health. And so our womb is central to everything, basically, and that's why we have these incredible rites of passage, menarche, into childbirth, into menopause. And so these really significant events where we're actually seeing huge hormonal changes. So puberty, where our hormones are switching on for the first time, we're driving eggs. Then when we come into our fertility as well, conception, and then, of course, birthing, you know, huge changes that a woman goes through in childbirth. And then, of course, into menopause. You know, we're birthing ourselves as well as birthing our children. But that's the thing. It's like rites of passage. So it's really, I think, important to tie in these significant changes with these rites of passage, because in the West, we basically don't honor anything or celebrate. No. And these are, I think this is what's important, because it also helps us to come back to who we are, and as we're always evolving.
Yeah. And we were talking about that somewhat last week, about, you know, being cyclical beings. And actually I had a little, I watched this guy who's like a tarot guy, but he was talking about the fact that, you know, we operate in cycles, like 7-year cycles, you know?
Yes.
So there's all of that is just like, and it's all actually tied to our bodies, right?
Yes, so 7-year cycles. That's what we have in Chinese medicine. Yeah. We run, women are 7-year cycles and men are 8-year cycles.
Yeah. And you're so right, because we're not really taught that in Western culture, are we? You know, and we're not taught to be in flow and in sync with it all and understand it. It's just basically, hey, you bleed once a month, deal with it, you know?
You get on with it, right?
Yeah. And
that's where I think you can see the missing key, right? The missing piece is that we've been so disconnected for so long. We don't understand any of the internal cues and external cues that our body is communicating with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, man, that's why we're so passionate about what we're doing with AMP, with All Natural Pharmacy, because, you know, we need to continue to normalize these conversations, speak about some of the tough things, and actually try and unpack all of this, which I feel like everyone's mind's completely blown, because we've had no questions tonight, which is really strange. But I reckon everyone's just like, falling off the chair. I'm going to have to watch this one 10 times over to digest it all. Maybe it was because you didn't have a diagram to show us tonight.
yes. I'll do a post. I'll put one up for the post so you can read about your anatomy.
Yeah, great. That sounds awesome. But yeah, we haven't really had any questions. I'm not sure if you want to touch on anything else, Mans. Otherwise, I'm going to just do some sort of admin kind of housekeeping just around the rest of the womb talks that we've got coming up this month. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to touch on before we wrap up tonight? Like, I think we've covered heaps of territory. I think we've realized the importance of our reproductive system and anatomy. We've touched on all different parts, what role they play, conditions like endo, adeno, where they sit in the body, fertility. Like, it's just like, there's a lot there. I mean, is there anything else that you kind of want to go through or leave us with?
I can't, to be honest. I've had a 12-hour day.
Oh, I know.
I really probably, if anyone's got any questions, ask us some questions. Be happy to answer your questions. But I can't actually think of anything. I think we've got a lot of wonderful, great, informative posts. If you're wanting to sort of have a look through our Instagram feed, you'll be able to see some really great posts there. Just excited to be able to, I mean, these womb talks have been fantastic with you to share with you, because just really important for us to get this information out there and educate you all more on your, you know, your body and your anatomy and just these normal bodily functions that keep us humming along each month.
Functioning day to day, you know. But and we've had such great feedback on Womb Talk, so thanks so much to everyone for joining and supporting us. We've got another couple coming up now for the rest of September. Hi. We've got another couple coming up for the rest of September. So next Monday, we're talking about debunking cycle myths, which I think will be really interesting, because if I actually wrote a list of cycle myths that I've grown up with, it's incredible. So we're going to debunk.
Send them in. If you've got some, send them in for us.
That's actually great. Yeah, that's actually a great idea. Do DM us or pop it on a post. Comment on this after once we've posted it and let us know some of your cycle myths, because it'd be great to unpack them next week. And then the following Monday, as the last four-part series of Womb Talks for Cycle Awareness Month, we're going to be talking about the pill, Mirena, UDID, and really just understanding contraception. So we've got 2 more coming up for the month of September for Cycle Awareness Month. And then we've got a whole bunch of topics that we're going to work through for more Womb Talks in the future. And it's pretty exciting. We've just had a really awesome response. So thank you so much to everyone for joining and supporting us in it, as we all move towards, you know, empowering menstruators and having these open conversations so we just make better informed health decisions. Totally. So thanks. And thanks so much, Mans, for your time. Please drive safely home and, you know, decompress. Have a little meditation before you get in that car tonight.
No, I'll just make sure. I think it's just like, quick, I've got to get home before the curfew.
Kids to bed. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh, forgotten about that one. Jeez.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
so
thanks,
true.
everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Have a great week.
See you next week. Okay.
And
see you, Amanda.
Get in touch down there. Okay.
Absolutely. Bye. See ya. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.